Abeni was a hard-working and intelligent woman, but in a world that valued beauty over talent, she was invisible. She had spent years proving her worth, yet one day, she lost everything, not because of her work, but because of how she looked. Humiliated and cast aside, she walked away in tears, but life had other plans. She would return to the same company, not as an employee, but as the boss's wife. How did she turn her pain into power? Stay with us, because this story will leave you speechless. Abeni, a 26-year-old woman from Accra, Ghana, came from a humble background. She had always been known for her intelligence, kindness, and strong work ethic, though she wasn't considered beautiful by society's standards. She never let that stop her. She worked hard to secure a job at WestGold Enterprises, a top financial firm in the city. It was a dream come true, one of the biggest achievements of her life. But what Abeni didn't know was that the very people who admired her dedication would soon turn against her. And the one leading the attack, Nia, the CEO's arrogant assistant, a woman who believed beauty was the only thing that mattered. Abeni loved her job. Every morning, she arrived at the office before anyone else, ready to work. She stayed late, making sure every task was done perfectly. She didn't just do her job, she went beyond expectations. Her bosses often praised her for her hard work and intelligence. Clients trusted her, and even some of her colleagues admired her dedication. But not everyone was impressed. Some whispered behind her back. She wasn't like the other women in the company. She didn't wear fancy makeup or stylish clothes. She didn't have the glamour that WestGold Enterprises seemed to expect. Some employees believed she didn't fit the company's image. No one disliked Abeni more than Nia, the CEO's personal assistant. Nia was beautiful, stylish, and always in control. She believed that a company like WestGold should only have sophisticated and attractive employees. To her, Abeni was an embarrassment. "She doesn't belong here," Nia often whispered to others. "She's ruining our company's image." But deep down, Nia's real problem wasn't Abeni's looks. It was her talent. Abeni was rising fast, gaining respect from important people in the company. Nia feared that one day, Abeni might even take her place, and that was something she couldn't allow. One afternoon, Abeni was called into the HR office. She walked in confidently, unaware of what was about to happen. The HR manager shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding eye contact. "Abeni," he said slowly, "we appreciate your hard work, but we have to let you go." Abeni's heart stopped. "What? But why?" The HR manager cleared his throat. "Your appearance, it doesn't align with the company's image. We need employees who reflect a certain standard." For a moment, Abeni couldn't speak. She had been fired, not because of her work, not because of her skills, but because of how she looked. Tears stung her eyes as she packed her belongings. Her hands shook, but she refused to cry in front of them. As she walked out of the office, Nia stood by the door, smirking. "You should have known this wasn't a place for people like you," she whispered, before turning away. Abeni stepped outside, feeling the weight of humiliation pressing down on her. She had worked so hard, given her best, and yet, none of it mattered. But as she walked away, something inside her changed. She wasn't going to let this be the end of her story. Life had bigger plans for her. Losing her job was one of the hardest things Abeni had ever faced. She had worked tirelessly, given her best, and yet she was thrown out like she was nothing. The humiliation burned inside her. She struggled to pay her bills, sending out job applications every day, hoping for a chance. But the rejection letters kept coming. Companies wanted experience, connections, or just like WestGold, a certain image. Some nights, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Nia had been right. Maybe she really didn't belong. Maybe the world only cared about appearances. But then, deep inside her, a fire flickered. She wasn't going to let them win. She wasn't going to let shallow people define her worth. If they didn't see her value, she would prove them wrong. One evening, tired from another long day of job hunting, Abeni stopped by a small cafe to rest. She sat in the corner, sipping her tea, when she noticed an older man watching her. His face was familiar, though she couldn't place him at first. Then it clicked. Kofi Mensah, the owner of several top companies, including WestGold Enterprises. She immediately looked away, not wanting to be recognized. But Mr. Mensah stood up and walked over to her table. "You're Abeni, aren't you?" he asked with a warm smile. "I've heard about you." Her heart pounded. Had he heard the cruel rumors? Did he think she was a failure? "You worked at WestGold," he continued. "I know how they treated you, and I also know they made a big mistake." Abeni blinked in surprise. "You do," Mr. Mensah chuckled. "People who judge others by their looks are the ones who are truly blind. I believe in character, not appearances. For the first time in weeks, Abeni felt hope. Mr. Mensah wasn't like the others. He didn't see her as a weak, dismissed employee. He saw her as someone with potential. "I have a new investment firm," he said. "I need people with intelligence and drive. You have both. How would you like to work for me?" Tears pricked Abeni's eyes, but this time they weren't from sadness. She nodded, unable to find the words to express her gratitude. At Mr. Mensah's firm, Abeni flourished. She handled major projects, managed teams, and made decisions that impressed even the most experienced executives. She no longer worried about fitting into anyone's image. She let her work speak for itself. Mr. Mensah watched her closely, not just as an employer, but as someone who deeply respected her. He saw the fire in her, the determination that made her different from others. She wasn't just hardworking, she was fearless. Over time, their relationship shifted. At first, it was professional, built on mutual respect, but as the months passed, they spent more time together, working late nights, discussing ideas, even sharing personal stories over dinner. Mr. Mensah had met many beautiful women in his life, but none had impressed him the way Abeni did. She was strong, intelligent, and kind. She didn't seek attention or approval. She simply wanted to be the best version of herself, and that was what made him fall in love with her. A few years later, in front of their closest friends and family, Mr. Mensah got down on one knee and proposed. Abeni, the woman who had once been humiliated and cast aside, was now standing beside one of the most powerful men in the country, not because of her looks, but because of her strength, her mind, and her heart. The same people who had once mocked her now whispered in awe. The same company that had thrown her out now wished they had never let her go. Abeni smiled. She had won, not by changing herself to fit their standards, but by staying true to who she was. The day Abeni stepped back into WestGold Enterprises, the entire office fell silent. The same hallways where she had once walked in fear and humiliation now echoed with the sound of her confident footsteps. Employees whispered, their eyes wide with disbelief. The woman they had mocked, the woman they had cast aside, was back. But this time, she wasn't just another worker. She was their new boss. Mr. Mensah, knowing Abeni's true worth, had made her a senior executive. She would oversee the company's operations and ensure that no one else would ever be treated the way she had been. The irony was delicious. WestGold had rejected her, only to have her return in a position of power. As she made her way through the office, Abeni spotted familiar faces. Some avoided her gaze, others forced awkward smiles. But there was one person who couldn't hide her shock, Nia. Nia's face went pale as she watched Abeni enter the executive office. She had spent years building her influence in the company, believing she was untouchable. But now, the very woman she had belittled stood above her. Not long after, Abeni called for a meeting. When Nia received the email, her hands trembled. She knew this moment was coming. Slowly, she walked into Abeni's office, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. Abeni sat at her desk, a calm smile on her face. "Take a seat, Nia," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Nia hesitated, then obeyed. "Do you remember," Abeni began, leaning slightly forward, "when you told me I wasn't good enough for this company? When you said I didn't belong?" Nia swallowed hard. "Abeni, Miss Abeni," she corrected, her voice firm but controlled. "You made it clear that I was not welcome here. You made sure I was humiliated and thrown out like garbage. Tell me, how does it feel now?" Nia lowered her gaze, unable to answer. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Abeni leaned back in her chair and sighed. "You see, Nia, life has a funny way of balancing things. You judged me based on appearances, but now you work for the very person you tried to destroy." Nia's hands clenched in her lap. "Are you going to fire me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Abeni smiled. That would be too easy. Instead, she stood and walked to the large glass window overlooking the office floor. "I'm making changes to this company. Starting today, WestGold Enterprises will no longer judge employees by their looks. Talent and hard work will be the only criteria for success." She turned back to Nia. "That means people like you, people who build their careers by stepping on others, will no longer have power here." Abeni then sent out an official announcement to all employees, stating the new company policy. The reaction was immediate. Cheers erupted across the office. Employees who had once feared being judged for their appearance felt relief and hope. Nia sat frozen in her chair, realizing the full extent of her mistake. She had spent years believing that beauty and status were the only things that mattered. But now, the woman she had looked down on had risen above her, not through revenge, but through change. As Nia left the office, she felt the weight of her own actions pressing down on her. She had lost, not just her influence, but the respect of everyone around her. Abeni watched her go, then smiled to herself. She had proven her worth, not by tearing others down, but by building something better. The best revenge wasn't firing Nia. It was showing her, and everyone else, that true power came from talent, strength, and resilience. And now, WestGold Enterprises would never be the same again. Abeni had won, not just against Nia, not just against WestGold Enterprises, but against the shallow mindset that had tried to define her. She had shown the world that success is built on talent, hard work, and resilience, not on appearance. The company that once rejected her now thrived under her leadership, and she made sure that no one else would suffer the humiliation she had endured. She used her influence to uplift others, especially women who had been judged unfairly. She created policies that rewarded skill and dedication, not superficial beauty. WestGold Enterprises became a place where people were valued for their work, not their looks. Abeni had turned her pain into power, and in doing so, she had rewritten the rules. Life will test you, people will judge you. But remember this, your value is not in how you look, but in what you bring to the world. And when the time is right, the very people who doubted you will have no choice but to respect you. Have you ever been judged unfairly? How did you prove them wrong? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.